The Mormon Church, the Mormon Church was founded by Joseph Smith in 1830. Its official name is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they're often called just the LDS Church. Okay, so I see somebody trying to call in. Ben, is that you? Did you call in, Ben?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfect, Ben Bird. Welcome to the show. Good. Thank you, Jesus. We got you in.
Thank you. Yeah, nice to be on your show.
Good. All right, Ben. So you're in. So I just mentioned in preparatory statements that the Mormon Church was founded by Joseph Smith in 1830. The Catholic Church was started by Jesus Christ in 33 A.D. We want to hear your story, Ben. I'm always fascinated to hear the way the Lord pulls people out from from some aberrant form of Christianity into the one true church. And so, Ben, take it away, my friend. You came into the Catholic Church a few years ago with your beautiful wife and your children, and you guys seem to be on fire Catholics. How did this happen?
It was a miracle. It was a miracle from God. So it's hard to explain how it happened or why it happened. I don't really know. You know, when Saul was on the road to Damascus and Jesus appeared to him, he had a radical conversion. And one of the things that I've wondered about that story is, why did Jesus appear to Saul and he did not appear to other people? There were plenty of Jews and Romans and pagans and everybody who were persecuting Christians, and Jesus did not appear to them, but he chose to appear to Saul. And I've asked people that question, and there's not really a succinct or good answer to that, I don't think. There just must have been something inside of Saul's heart, or it was part of God's plan. Nobody knows. It's kind of a mystery why God chose Saul and he didn't choose somebody else to appear to. So I don't know why. I kind of look back and I think it's kind of mysterious that I converted to Catholicism, and a lot of other people I know have not converted to Catholicism.
And Ben, let me just preface that, being that there's no Catholics on either side of your family, correct? I mean, you come from a steep Mormon tradition, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, not a single one has converted to Catholicism. I've tried. I've invited them to things. My brother, two of my brothers came to my baptism in 2021. That's when I got baptized. But other than that, my mom came to a mass one time. But other than that, no, none of them have ever converted. My ancestors have all been Mormon. My grandmother and my grandfather on both sides were Mormon. And so my full name is Benjamin Freeman Bird, and I'm named after my great, 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 great grandfather. That's 6 greats. He knew Joseph Smith personally. He lived in the same small town as him. And he was one of the early converts to Mormonism, I think in 1831 or 1832 or something like that, when it was very tiny, because the Mormon Church started in the year 1830. Anyway, so my ancestors have been faithful Mormons all the way since those days. And I was raised in a devout Mormon family. And I went on a mission to West Virginia from the year 2002 to the year 2004. And I tried to convert people to Mormonism. And so what happened was, in the year 2010, my older brother shocked the whole family when he said he did not want to be Mormon anymore. He was a superhero in my eyes. He was a very devout Mormon. And so I was flabbergasted when he broke the news that he didn't believe in Mormonism anymore. And he became agnostic, and he still is agnostic to this day. Well, I started talking with him in the year 2010. He shared some information with me that was scary and unsettling. So I said, I don't want to talk to you anymore. And then 2 years went by. So in the year 2012, I had this kind of crazy coworker who was into some fringe Mormon ideas. He shared with me a book called Passing the Heavenly Gift by Denver Snuffer. Denver Snuffer is a fringe Mormon. He's a weirdo Mormon, I guess you would say. A lot of people believe in his teachings. And I was starting to believe in his teachings a little bit too. And I actually thought that maybe some of the writings of Denver Snuffer would convince my brother to come back to Mormonism, because I prayed for that. I wanted that to happen for my older brother to come back to Mormonism. And so I said, hey, Morris, let's make a deal. How about I read any book that you want and you read any book that I want? And hopefully my book will convince you to be Mormon, and hopefully the book that you recommend will convince me that I should still be Mormon, right? That's what I was hoping was going to happen. Well, what happened? What happened was my brother recommended a book called An Insider's View of Mormon Origins by Grant Palmer. And that book just rocked my world. It was very well argued, very well documented, very scholarly. It also had a nice tone. It wasn't slinging mud or anything. It was, I think, fair and balanced and even. And I read that whole book, and it really changed my life. And I also read a response to that book from. What's funny is that the Mormon Church has never responded to that book, as
Mm.
well as things like the CES letter, which is another popular, and some would call it anti-Mormon. It's a document that's critical of the claims of Mormonism. It's called the CES letter, and
Mm.
that's free online. Anybody can read that one for free. And but the church has never responded to those, like officially. You know what I mean? The leaders of the Mormon Church have never responded to the CES letter. The leaders of the Mormon Church have never responded to an insider's view of Mormon origins. It's just total cricket. That's crazy. And
And
there's no,
these
and
are
they call
works.
themselves prophet seers and revelators. They call themselves prophet seers and revelators. So they're supposed to be getting direct revelation from God all the time. They're supposed to be having these ecstatic visions all the time. This is what we were led to believe as Mormons, and yet they will not respond to the CES letter, and they will not respond to an insider's view of Mormon origins by Grant Palmer. It's insane, because it's not just me. It's not just a handful of people who have read these things and had questions and eventually left the Mormon Church. It's thousands of people, if not millions of people, right? Because that's what's happening a lot right now with the internet. Is a lot of Mormons are leaving because they're learning about the truth about the origins of the Mormon Church.
Mm.
Now, there is an organization called FAIR, FAIR, and I think it was an acronym that stood for the Foundation for Ancient Indigenous Research or something like that. And originally, they were trying to prove the Book of Mormon true. They were trying to find the archaeology that would prove the Book of Mormon true. And they're still around, and they used to be called FAIR LDS. Now they're called FAIR Mormon, and they they responded to the book. Okay, so all I'm saying is I read a lot of response to the book. I read both sides. I read the the pro Mormon side and the anti Mormon side. I hear some music. Do we need to
Yeah, I know.
stop?
I hear. No, no. It could just continue. Yeah, yeah. Mr. Engineer, I heard some music in the background. It's gone now, but go ahead, Ben. I can hear you perfect.
Great. Okay, so I read the response to this book that again was not the official response, because there is no official response. But I read what some faithful Mormons put up on the internet as a response to this book. And the arguments just don't satisfy me, and they don't satisfy very many people. And I mean, the stuff on that website sometimes is just a joke, because their arguments suck. That's all there is to it. Their
Ben,
arguments.
Ben, that's. I mean, you did a deep dive on your knowledge of Mormonism, which and your investigation. You could tell you rolled up your sleeves, and you could tell that your conversion to the Catholic faith wasn't something that happened overnight. You could tell that you've been wrestling with this for years. I could just hear you. I read this book and I read this book, and I'm going online hearing these arguments. So this is something that God put in your heart, and you're a seeker of truth. That's
Yes.
and so let's continue. How did you stumble across the Catholic Church?
Well, what's funny is as I look back on my life, I realized that I had a lot of contact with the Catholic Church, and I had a lot of contact with Catholics.
Mm.
I grew up in southern Arizona, and there were a lot of Catholics there in the Tucson area in Arizona. And a lot of my friends actually were Catholic. A lot of the people I knew in school were Catholic. They were not on fire Catholics for the most part. A lot of them were pretty casual, I guess, but they were still good people and good Catholics. Um, so I actually went to a mass one time when I was a senior in high school. A friend of mine invited me and I went to there and I had a good experience. Unfortunately, I never went again. I never got invited again. I never took the initiative to go again. It was just one nice night and then it was over. Um, and then there was also, I grew up close to the San Javier Mission, which is in the southern part of Tucson.
Okay.
And I think Father Kino established that a long time ago. And actually, public school for elementary school, and we went on a field trip to the San Javier Mission, and it's a national monument or something like that. So, but it's still an active parish, so they still have mass in there every Sunday, and it's on the Tohoto O'odham Indian Reservation in southern Arizona, and it's this beautiful building. And it's in between Sarita and Tucson, and you can see it right from the freeway. So I drove past the San Javier Mission a million times growing
Mm-hmm.
up. And I actually visited there. It's actually a popular spot just for tourists
Mm-hmm.
and also to take pictures. And I have Mormon friends who like to go there and take good pictures of themselves with this San Iber mission in the background, right? Because it's just this pretty old Spanish colonial style or whatever building. It's a lot like the missions in California.
Okay.
If you're ever in the area, I recommend going there. But anyway, I went there a lot just to visit. I never went to a mass there. It was just, you just go there and you look at the statues. I remember this weird kind of thing that on the front of the facade, on the door, there was a statue of a mouse and a statue of a cat on the archway or something. And the tour guide told us that these statues are slowly moving. And whenever the cat statue catches the mouse statue, that's when Christ comes back.
Mm. And I was talking with you last night about that a little bit. I want to get to the point of when you became Catholic. What was the connection? But one of the things that I have noticed myself is that there is kind of these fascinating connections between Mormonism and Freemasonry. Um, Freemasons are the arch enemies of the Catholic Church, or they've deemed the Catholics as their arch enemies. And I know from reading history, Mormon history, that many of I think the first 5 Latter-day Saint prophets were Freemasons, starting with Joseph Smith, who joined the Masons in 1842, a little bit after he founded the LDS Church. I also know that the church, the LDS Church, the Mormons and Masonry, they use several of the same symbols. You know, the all-seeing eye, the hand clasp. Uh, I've also seen similarities between the Masonic Lodge and temple ordinances. I think there's a kind of a relationship between the two. You know, I don't want to oversimplify it or overstate it either, but there seems to be some borrowing from each other. And also the Mormons teach that the Mormon leadership agrees that the Freemasons, they can be traced back to the priesthood, I guess, all the way back to the time of the Old Testament. So there's some overlap between Freemasonry and Mormonism. There isn't with Catholicism. They hate the Catholic Church. Catholic Church is the arch enemy of Freemasonry. and Ben, what would they think about when they saw the last pope being installed, the 267th Bishop of Rome, as Americans watching television? Don't people say, like, wow, those Catholics, they go all the way back to Peter in Jerusalem, to the time of Christ? Aren't the Mormons kind of historically minded? Or are they so caught up and the church apostatized and it jump started back in 1830?
Yeah, I don't know what the Mormons think when they see Pope Leo being installed. Or one of the things that really impressed me was when I opened up a Catholic Bible one time and it had a list of the popes all the way from Peter until Pope John Paul II or something like that. It just had all their names listed. It took up about 5 pages or something. And that was really moving and incredible. Um, yeah, they think that the Catholic Church is just steeped in these old traditions and paganism or all this nonsense. They don't accept the Pope or anything. But one thing that's kind of funny is I remember things like Mormons would say, that if it's not us that's right, it's the Catholics, because they have the right claim to authority, and the Protestants just broke off of the Catholic Church. So if it's not the Mormons that are right, it's definitely the Catholics. So Mormons would say that a lot. Here's another kind of funny thing. When I was 12 years old, I got the Aaronic priesthood. So my dad and some other men formed a circle. They put their hands on top of my head. They said a prayer, and they said that they conferred upon me the Aaronic priesthood. That's when I was 12 years old. And you know what they said after that? They said, guess what, Ben? Now you have more real priesthood than the Pope.
Wow. Wow. Well, I know you laugh now, but unbelievable. The way some people are just steeped in this
Yeah.
blindness, this theological error. Ben, so what were the circumstances that brought you to the Catholic faith? Was it a person? Was it an event? Was it a song? Was it a retreat? Was it a conference? Was it a radio show? Was it a book? What brought you in to the one true church? What were the
I
steps?
was definitely, like you said, I'm a seeker of truth. I was looking for truth. I was looking for stability. I was also looking for a community. I was looking for just good people with good values. And I did some church hopping back in 2013. I went to a Presbyterian church, a Baptist church, not Presbyterian, but some other ones. I went to a handful of churches,
Uh-huh.
including non-denominational,
Yep.
and none of them satisfied me for whatever reason. I thought, these are just nice churches, but the Mormon church is nice too, so I'll just stick with that one, even though I don't believe in a lot of it. Um, so what happened? But it was unsettling. It was for 7 years. I went to the Mormon church, even though I didn't believe in it. At least I believed in Jesus. I believed in a lot of the stuff that they would teach. So a lot of what they teach is just like be a good dad, be a good husband, care for your neighbor, bring your neighbor cookies, that type of stuff. Yeah, I'm all on board with that. And I felt like most of the stuff that they do and they teach, yeah, I agree with that. It sounds good. Who can be opposed to that stuff?
Right.
Which actually kind of reminds me of something that my mom said once, which was the devil will tell you 99 true things in order to get you to believe one lie.
Amen.
So
Yeah.
what the devil does is he says all this true and good and beautiful stuff, but then he slips in something ugly, and then he slips in something false, and he slips in something bad. You know what I mean? So that's what Mormonism does. Like most of what they do, it seems like, yeah, that's really good. Who can argue with that? It's like be a good person, love your parents, believe in Jesus, all this kind of basic stuff that, like, yeah, everybody's on board with that pretty much. But then they say stuff like, oh yeah, there was a great apostasy. Joseph Smith was a prophet. The Book of Mormon is true. You have to go to the temple. There's a heavenly mother, and I'm not talking about the Blessed Virgin Mary. I'm
Yeah.
talking about a goddess that they call Heavenly Mother.
Mm.
So they
Mm.
believe in a Heavenly Mother. So what happened was on April 15th, 2019, the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, France was on fire. And I was just watching the news. I was listening to the news on the radio on my drive home, and that's when I heard that the cathedral was on fire. And I thought, whoa, what is going on? That's a crazy news story. And I was
Mm.
immediately hooked and I was gripped. And then I spent the rest of the night after I got home from work. It was like all I could think about. And then after dinner or whatever, I got on the computer, and I was on the computer for hours after that. I was wondering, is the whole building going to burn down? I was wondering who did it. Was it arson? I was wondering, oh, and then there was this one dramatic moment where a priest ran in to the building while it was on
Mm.
fire and grabbed the crown of thorns relic. And he took it to some safe place and kept it
Mm.
safe in some undisclosed location. And I had never heard of the crown of thorns relic before. I was like, wait, are they talking about the real crown of thorns that was actually on Jesus's head when he was crucified? The Catholics really think that they have the actual crown of thorns? Because no other church has anything close to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or
And
even claims it, or even claims it. Right. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if they did claim to have a relic like the Shroud of Turin or the Crown of Thorns, or I don't know, like the bones of St. Peter or something like that,
Yes.
there'd be scientists all over them saying like, yeah, right, that's bogus. That's not St. Peter's bones. That's just a cow bone or something, like,
Mhm.
or that's not the Shroud of Turin. That's just some dirty laundry.
Hmm.
But no, the Catholics actually have these relics that go way back in time, and
Mm.
so that really got my attention. And so I remember watching a video of a virtual tour of the Notre Dame Cathedral and just being in awe of the beauty of it.
Mm.
And I thought about all the men who had built the cathedral, who worked so long and so hard, and they wanted to build something that was going to last and that would last forever. I mean, it stood for 1,000 years or something like that, still up. Um, and I was completely moved by the story, and I was very sad. So it was like this, and that's the turning point. So what's cool is I
Wow.
looked up the date after that, and I looked up, oh yeah, that happened on April 15th, 2019. So I can put a date on it. That's when I became radically obsessed with Catholicism.
Wow.
And my conversion just happened basically through online, through YouTube and lots of research. And then I eventually read a couple of books. I read Rome Sweet Home by Scott Hahn. And I went to RCIA, now called OCIA.
Hmm.
And there was a great teacher, and that went really well.
I'm sure also Catholic.com, Catholic Answers has a lot of resources on
Yes,
Mormonism. I'm sure that was helpful as well, right?
absolutely.
And I'm sure you're also helped by, because somebody who's also talks a lot about Mormonism and he's on radios, Patrick Madrid on Relevant
Uh-huh.
Radio. Pat's also he's had debates against Mormon scholars from Brigham Young University. In fact, there's one online which I recommend every Mormon should listen to it. Pat just dismantles a Mormon professor piecemeal, and
Yeah.
so it was your investigation. You started rationally. You started. You were becoming convinced through rational biblical arguments that the Catholic Church is where you needed to be. Correct?
Correct. Yeah, I remember reading John chapter 6 with my new Catholic lens because
Mm,
I grew up reading the Bible with a Mormon lens. It was a
okay.
filter, it was a psychological filter, and I wasn't actually understanding the words on the page as they were intended or what the words really mean. I was reading with my eyes closed. I don't know. I was reading with all these thoughts in my mind that had been implanted there from my Mormon upbringing. So actually, there's a verse in the Bible where some scribes or some Pharisees, they go to Jesus and they say, "Who is married in the afterlife?" Because this one woman has had 7 different husbands during her life. So when they die, who's going to be married to who? And Jesus says, "You have erred, not understanding the scriptures, for people are neither married nor given in marriage in the resurrection, but they're like the angels in heaven." So, what I think the clear meaning of that passage is Jesus is saying there's no marriage in heaven. Nobody's married to anybody.
Correct. Yeah.
But when I was a Mormon, I thought it meant somehow I explained it to where it didn't mean that. And that was one of those verses that always puzzled me. Because I was like, well, no, yeah, because eternal marriage is so tantamount or paramount. I'm not sure if I'm using the right word, but it's central. Eternal marriage is central to Mormonism. They put a ton of emphasis on it. And you have to be married to be a bishop and stuff like that. It was a long process. I stopped believing all the Mormon stuff in the year 2012 when I read An Insider's View of Mormon Origins by Grant Palmer. And for 7 years, I was just dazed and confused. And it wasn't like I was a strong Christian. I was borderline agnostic. Um, I briefly read a book about Buddhism and thought it was pretty cool. Um, so I
Mm.
was just kind of wandering. So then it took me a while, but it would have been in 2020, I guess. 2019 and 2020 is when I finally made in a way, it was a choice. It was a decision, an act of the will to say, yes, I believe that. But I don't understand the Trinity. Nobody does.
Mm.
But I accept it, and I accept the authority, and I haven't wavered ever since my conversion. Like the more I learn about Catholicism, even today, like the more it makes sense to me, and the more it feels right. So I'd say 2020 was the time when I decided, yes, I'm Catholic. I believe all the stuff that I'm supposed to believe.
Wow.
There was actually one. It took me a while to believe some of the stuff, like for example, transubstantiation.
Hmm.
I didn't believe that for a while. And even when
Okay.
I was praying the rosary every day and I was going to mass every Sunday, for a couple of months or more, or even in a year, I still wasn't quite on board with that. I guess I was kind of skeptical. In fact, when I was picking out a patron or a confirmation saint, I thought about picking Saint Thomas because he was doubting Thomas, and I thought I could relate to him. He doubts, I doubt. But then I thought, no offense to Saint Thomas, but then I thought, why do I want to pick someone who's famous for doubting? Um, and so I went with Saint Peter for my confirmation saint.
Got it.
But yeah, okay. So I remember asking my RCIA teacher. I said, Catholics don't believe in transubstantiation, right? Is that the statistic? Like a crazy amount of Catholics don't actually believe in the real presence.
Correct. About 2 out of 3.
So I said to my RCIA teacher, so why do I have to believe it in order to get baptized? And she said, well, if you want to go down the street and find some liberal church, they'll probably just let you in without believing in that. But here, we are going to teach you the truth, and you need to accept it and you need to believe it before we will baptize you here at our parish. So that was her response, and I really appreciated that. And really, all it took was just watching a couple videos about Eucharistic miracles, and then I was on board.
Yeah, exactly. Science validates what Catholics have believed for 2,000 years.
Also doing a close reading of John chapter 6. Because like I said before, when I didn't have my Mormon lens on anymore, and when I put on the Catholic lens, it just made so much more sense. And I wouldn't even say it was like a Catholic lens. I would say, okay, I'm just kind of trying to get rid of all the psychological baggage in my mind, and I'm trying to read the words on the paper as they exist and trying to understand it as best I can, using my own rational adult mind. And when I read John chapter 6, and I considered the context of the whole Bible and all the stories and everything, I was like, the Catholic interpretation is right. It's just, what's funny, sometimes people criticize Catholics because they say, oh, Catholics, they don't even like reading the Bible because they're not allowed to interpret it. You know what I mean? Like, only the church is allowed to interpret the Bible. But the funny thing about that is, at some level, we have to interpret the Bible whenever we read it. It's just that we understand that the church, the magisterium, has the final say about what the Bible means.
Amen.
But the cool thing is that you can check it out for yourself, read it for yourself, and use your own rational brain and say, does this make sense? Does what the Catholic Church teaches about what this means make sense? And my answer is yes. The Catholic Church is just always right about what the Bible means. That's all there is to it.
Ben, what about this this problem? Was this a problem for you as this what's called this continuing revelation, ongoing revelation, where the Mormon prophet, which is the the highest rung of the ladder in Mormonism, where something that was church teaching yesterday is no longer church teaching today as a result of ongoing revelation? For example, I know that blacks weren't allowed in the LDS church for decades. There was a Supreme Court decision that rendered. Go ahead.
Can I just clarify just a tiny bit?
Thank you.
So they were allowed in the church. It was just they were not allowed in the temple.
Got it. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
And also the black men were not allowed to have the priesthood. They were never ordained to the priesthood, and they were never allowed in the temple.
Thanks for the correction. Yeah. But then a Supreme Court decision kind of made the prophet, gave him this continuing revelation where all of a sudden they opened it, all the avenues of the church to blacks after the Supreme Court decision, correct?
Correct. Yeah. It was after the civil rights movement. There was a lot of social and political pressure on the LDS church to let black men be ordained to the priesthood.
What about polygamy? Is polygamy one of those also ongoing revelation?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. In fact, the last time that a prophet went on a secular media interview was more than 20 years ago or something like that. So they don't do interviews. But at least with secular media they don't put themselves in a situation where they can be challenged or embarrassed or anything like that. So that's why they just don't talk to the media. They don't do interviews. But there was a man named President Gordon B. Hinckley. He was the main prophet when I was a kid. He went on Larry King on CNN and was interviewed by him. And Larry King asked Gordon B. Hinckley about polygamy. And you know what President Hinckley said? He said, well, when it comes to polygamy, I'm not sure we teach that. I'm not sure it's doctrinal. I'm not sure that we emphasize that. And
Hmm.
he said, any Mormon who practices polygamy is excommunicated. So here was the president of the church, and he just gave this kind of wishy-washy political answer. And I was thinking, like, wait, you're the prophet and you're not sure whether it's doctrine or not? That seems like a big deal. You know what I mean? It
Hmm.
seems like you should know whether polygamy was doctrinal or if it wasn't or what. But that's a very complicated subject. But yes, it's the Mormon Church used to practice polygamy. They got a lot of pressure from the government in the late 1800s, and they had to abandon it. They claimed that they got a revelation. They claimed that God said, it's time to stop polygamy. But really, that was just a cover story. And basically, all their assets were going to be seized by the government. Their leaders were going to be thrown in prison. Um, so they had said, okay, we got to survive, so we got to give up polygamy.
Ben, you got 2 minutes left. If any Mormons are watching you right now, or people are struggling, they're exactly where you were at. They're coming out of the Mormon church and they're confused. What would you say to somebody that's looking at the Catholic Church? They're steeped in Mormonism right now, but they're very open to Catholicism. What would you tell them? You've got 2 minutes, my friend. Go ahead.
I would tell them, give Catholicism a chance. What I did was I did an experiment for 30 days where I said, okay, I don't necessarily believe in this at all, but I'm going to pray the rosary every day for 30 days and I'm going to see what
Mm.
happens to my life. Just give Catholicism a chance. It's the biggest church on earth. It's 2,000 years old. Um, Experiment. And if I was talking to Mormons who are exploring, then they would understand what I'm about to say. And that is, I think it's in Alma chapter 32. That's in the Book of Mormon. He says, even if you can no more than desire to believe, let that desire work in you, even to try and experiment upon my words and plant a seed. There's something about Alma says, plant a seed in your heart and see if the seed is good. So I would say, do an experiment. Follow Alma's advice in there in the Book of Mormon. Do an experiment. I would recommend praying the rosary every day for at least 30 days. Um, or just going to mass or whatever, like just actually take some action towards it to see if God sends you any signs. And that's what it did for me. Hey, Jesse, can I read some poems super briefly? They're really brief.
Sure. You got
Okay.
about a minute and a half. Ben's also a poet, so go ahead and share some of your poems.
All
And tell
right.
us how people can buy the book, by the way.
Okay, go on Amazon.com and look for Benjamin F. Bird and look for the book How to Replace a Whammy Gasket on a Yodel Clopper, and look for the book Blast Off, Are You a Honey Cruncher Kid? And Other Poems. Those are both by me, Benjamin F. Bird.
Got it right
And
here. Got it.
okay, that's the old cover. I have another book right here, if any of you
Okay.
are looking at this.
Got it.
Even though this is actually not the right cover either. What's funny about that? But anyway,
Share a
okay.
poem. Share a poem, bro, before we wrap it up.
The devil's idea of a hero is the Roman Emperor Nero.
Mm.
He's not feeling well because now he's in hell, and the number of his friends is 0.
Oh, that's good. I like that. Give us another one.
For those on a spiritual search, you'll find God in the Catholic Church, and then make a stop at the church's gift shop for a rosary and other great merch.
Wow, I love it. Give us another one. We got time.
What's up with churches these days? They're caught up in the feel-good craze. They say, come as you are, you awesome rock star. They pick the wrong person to praise.
Ah. I think we can squeeze in one more. Go ahead. Squeeze in one more.
Cannibals shout when the blood flows. Murder to them is a fun show. But they should be quiet and start a new diet, since all the good Catholics have said so.
Well, thank you very
Um,
much, my friend. How can people get these books, these poems?
Yeah, so art is really important. I'm more into art and not as so much into philosophy and theology and stuff. And so I think the good Catholics need to create art, and that's what I've been trying to do with my poetry books. So they're on Amazon.com. It's How to Replace a Whammy Gasket on a Yodel Clopper and Other Poems, and also Blast Off, Are You a Honey Cruncher Kid? And Other Poems. A lot of them are very religious and spiritual in the subject matter. A lot of them are funny. A lot of them are serious. But I'm trying to promote my books more lately because I've gotten some positive feedback about my poetry.
Thanks a lot, Ben. We'll have to have you on again. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me on. God bless you.
You got it. Keep it here on vmpr.org. Stick around. More good Catholic programming.